My name is Nadia Reeves, and I have been married for 7 months. I want to tell you the story of how that happened, because the how is the entire point, and because I think if I only show you the ending, you will miss the part that actually matters. I am not someone who grew up dreaming about weddings, in the way that word is sometimes meant. I did not have a scrapbook, I did not have a color palette selected at 14. What I had was a grandmother who sat me down when I was 15 and told me she was starting something for me, a small fund, added to every birthday and Christmas, that she wanted to grow into something I could use on a day that mattered. She called it the future account. She said, "I do not know what you will use it for. Maybe a house, maybe a wedding, maybe something I cannot imagine yet, but I want you to have a start that does not depend on anyone else giving you permission." She died when I was 19. By then, the account had a number in it that felt significant to a 19-year-old and modest to an adult. But it was hers, and it was mine, and I understood its value as something beyond money. My parents told me they would hold it for me. They told me they would add to it when they could. They told me it was safe. I was 19, and I trusted them in the way you trust people before you have enough information to do otherwise. I went to university, I got a degree, I got a job, I started saving my own portion every month into the same account, the future account, watching the number grow with the specific satisfaction of someone building something deliberately. By the time I was 26 and Marcus proposed on a Tuesday evening in our kitchen over pasta that had gone slightly cold, the account had a number in it that could fund a real wedding. Not extravagant, real, the kind of day I actually wanted. I called my parents the morning after the proposal. My mother cried in the good way. My father said, "Marcus is a good man, we always knew." They said they were proud. They said the fund was there. They said, "Whenever you are ready, just tell us and we will make it work." I said, "We're thinking spring." They said, "Perfect." I hung up feeling the particular warmth of a plan that is coming together. I did not know yet that the plan had already come apart. My brother, Callum, is 3 years older than me. I want to be fair to him in this telling, the same way I try to be fair to everyone, because fairness is what separates an honest account from a grievance. Callum is not a bad person. He is a person who has spent his adult life being the one my parents worried about, the one whose choices required management, the one whose needs arrived loudly and urgently, while mine arrived quietly and on schedule. I had learned over many years that quiet and on schedule was its own kind of invisibility in my family. Callum's needs were visible, mine were assumed to be handled. He had started a business the previous year, a catering company, which was something he genuinely knew about and had worked in for a decade. I had been cautiously optimistic about it. The business needed capital in its second quarter, more than he had, more than he could borrow from a bank at a rate that made sense. My parents gave him the money. I do not know exactly when the decision was made. I do not know if there was a conversation about it, or a moment of hesitation, or whether my name came up at all. What I know is that 3 weeks after Marcus proposed, my parents sat me down in their kitchen, and my mother said, "Nadia, we need to talk to you about the account." And I looked at her face, and I already knew. I did not know the specific shape of what had happened, but I knew the shape of that conversation, the particular quality of her voice when she was delivering information she had already decided I would accept. She said, "Your father and I made a decision earlier this year to support Callum's business." She said, "We used the fund." She said, "It was a family decision and we thought you would understand because you have always been the steady one and Callum needed a foundation and we knew you and Marcus were both working and could save." She said, "We are so sorry, Nadia. We are going to make it right." My father said, "We will rebuild it. We just need some time." I sat with what they had said. I calculated, quietly, what had been in that account. 11 years of my grandmother's contributions, 7 years of mine, gone into a catering business that, I would find out 6 weeks later, had already filed for insolvency. I said, "Okay." I said it once, clearly, and I meant it as the full sentence it was, not as agreement, not as forgiveness, but as the specific "okay" that means I have received this information and I know exactly what I am going to do with it. My mother said, "We knew you would understand." I nodded. I left. I want to tell you what I did next because this is the part of the story that people sometimes misunderstand. I did not plan revenge. I want to be precise about that because the word revenge implies something hot and reactive, and what I felt was neither of those things. What I felt was cold clarity, the specific, focused calm of someone who has been handed a problem and is already solving it. Marcus and I sat down that evening. I told him everything. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to get married." He said, "Then we are getting married." He said, "Tell me the number we are working with and we will build from there." The number we were working with was what we had saved independently, together, over 3 years of being careful. It was not the number I had planned around. It was smaller. It was also, I realized as I sat with it, enough. Not for the wedding other people had imagined for me, for the wedding I actually wanted. I took out a piece of paper. I wrote down what mattered. Marcus, 40 people I loved, a dress, a meal, music, photographs. I did not write down a venue that would impress people who were not going to be there. I did not write down a guest list that included people I was inviting out of obligation. I wrote down what the day actually needed to be what it was supposed to be, and I built the budget around that list. My best friend Joanna had gotten married 2 years before in a small ceremony at a converted barn 40 minutes outside the city. She made one phone call on my behalf. The venue had a cancellation for the second Saturday in April. The price was within what we had. I said yes before I finished reading the email. I found my dress in a second-hand bridal shop. Ivory, simple, fitted. The kind of dress that looks like it was made for one person. It had been worn once by a woman whose marriage had not lasted, and I thought about that as I paid for it and carried it home, and I hoped she had found something better. I altered the hem myself over 3 evenings. Marcus wore the suit he had bought for his brother's wedding 2 years before, cleaned and pressed. We hired a photographer we had seen at a friend's event whose work made us feel something. We ordered food from a restaurant that agreed to cater for 40 at a price that worked. We did not tell my parents. I thought about it once in the 3rd week of planning, and I sat with the thought for about 20 minutes. I thought about what that conversation would look like, the explanations, the apologies, the possibility that they might come and stand in the photographs of a day they had partly dismantled and be absorbed back into the narrative without consequence. I decided against it. This was not cruelty, it was clarity. Some spaces need to be protected from the people who have already shown you what they do with things that belong to you. We got married on a Saturday in April. I want to tell you what that day was like because I think the telling of it matters as much as the telling of the injustice, maybe more. The barn was warm with string lights. The 41 people in it were the 41 people who had been present in our lives in ways that were real and consistent and earned. Joanna stood beside me. Marcus's brother stood beside him. My grandmother's sister, 81 years old, sat in the front row in a lavender coat she had bought specifically for the occasion and cried from the moment I walked in. She had known about the fund. She had contributed to it twice. She squeezed my hand before I walked down and said she would have loved this. I knew who she meant. The meal was warm and loud and ran 2 hours over schedule because nobody wanted it to end. The photographer caught a moment between Marcus and I that I have looked at many times since, a moment between the ceremony and the meal where we were standing just outside the barn door in the late afternoon light, not posed, not performing, just standing together in the fact of what we had just done, and both of us were laughing at something neither of us can remember now. That photograph is on our wall. It cost less than the flowers at the wedding my parents had imagined for me. I posted one photograph on Facebook the following morning, Sunday, the photograph of Marcus and me outside the barn, the one with the late afternoon light. The caption said, Mr. and Mrs. Marcus Reeves, April 12th. I put my phone down and made coffee and did not look at it again for 3 hours. When I looked, there were 47 comments and 11 missed calls. 7 of the missed calls were from my mother, 3 were from my father, 1 was from Callum. I read the comments first. They were warm, joyful, full of the particular happiness that people feel when they see something real. Then I looked at the calls. I put my phone back down. I poured a second coffee. Marcus came into the kitchen, and I showed him the screen, and he looked at it for a moment, and then he looked at me and said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "Nothing today." He said, "Okay." He poured his own coffee, and we sat at the kitchen table in the apartment that was now the home of two married people, and we talked about everything and nothing, and the calls went unanswered, and the morning was quiet and entirely ours. My mother left a voicemail. I listened to it once. She said she was hurt. She said she could not believe we had not told them. She said family is family, and this was not how things were supposed to go. She said she hoped I understood what she had done to me. I sat with that last sentence for a while, what I had done to her. I thought about my grandmother sitting at a table, starting something small and careful for a girl she loved, wanting her to have a beginning that did not depend on anyone's permission. I thought about 11 years of that beginning disappearing into a business filing that was already in insolvency before I had even chosen a dress. I thought about what I had done to her. I decided that what I had done was get married, in a barn, in a dress I altered myself, to a man who asked me what I wanted and then helped me build it, in front of 41 people who had earned their place in the room. I called my mother back 4 days later. I let her speak. I said, I am married and I am happy. And I said, when you're ready to talk about what happened to the account, I'm ready to have that conversation. We have not had it yet. I do not know if we will. What I do know is that the photographs are on the wall, and the morning was ours, and my grandmother's sister sent me a card the following week with a small check inside and a note that said she always knew you would find a way. She was right. That is my story. If it stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop your city in the comments, hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.